Hi guys, it's Thursday, March 26th, 2020, and we're back with video number 8 in our Skill a Day series. Today we're going to be going over how to make soup from scratch, but all the way from scratch, including our stock. Now I'm just making a single batch of soup, so I'm just going to use a reasonable sized pot. If you are using maybe a turkey carcass that you're going to be cooking up, or if you're planning on making multiple batches of soup, you're going to want to use a stock pot at that point. Now for my meat base today, I'm just using leftover chicken from dinner the other night. You can use whatever bits and pieces you have laying around. You can do turkey, chicken, ham bone, prime rib, duck, whatever you're using though, you want to make sure that it's cooked first, and that's really just about the developing flavor. Okay, it's going to get cooked through while it's boiling in the water anyway, so it's not a concern about that, but really that's where a lot of your flavor is going to come from. Roasting is probably one of the best ways to develop that flavor. Now, when we are making a stock, we're not using the best bits of meat, we're not using the best bits of our vegetables, we're using the leftovers. So what I have here is just a freezer bag full of odds and ends from my vegetables. Like I've got ends of onions, and I've got some carrot peels, and I've got celery ends. Usually I have some parsley stems in here too. And anytime that I'm doing kitchen prep, instead of throwing this stuff into the compost, I throw it into here, keep it in the freezer, and then when I'm ready to make stock, I have this on hand. So I'm just going to put that in with my meat. Now I actually need a bit more than what I already have in the freezer. And so for whatever soup I'm making tonight, I've just gone ahead, pre-peeled and cut off the ends. I'm going to throw that in too. Now, as you're adding your things into your stock, I want you to be thinking about your variety of flavors. Do you have things that are going to add some brightness and acidity? Okay, you can add all kinds of vegetables. There's some you want to stay away from, like broccoli, asparagus, anything that the flavor changes and degrades the longer you cook it. But if you want to make like a tomato-based soup, it would be great to throw in some odds and ends off of your tomatoes. You can do lemon peels in here, but you have to think about what you want your end flavor to be. So if you're making like a standard chicken noodle soup, maybe you don't want the tomato flavor in the base yet. So think about that as you're adding things, same with peppers. But generally speaking, celery, carrot, onion, those are all great. You can add a little bit of bite with things like parsnips and ginger if you're looking for maybe a more exotic flavor. Then you can start thinking about umami. Mushrooms are a great base for that. It gives it some depth. Fish sauce, you can look at, well, not every soup would love fish sauce, but you'd be surprised. You can add wines. Maybe you want to do a white wine for brightness or a red wine for depth. Okay, there's lots of different flavors that you can start building on now in the stock stage. You can also add Parmesan rinds, which I like to save for when I do a prime rib stock, but that adds a nice depth and a nice fullness of the flavor. Now, not all of your flavor for your soup needs to come in the stock stage, but you want to have a good base developed for it. What we're going to do once we have our odds and ends in here, you're just going to cover it with cold water, and you want to simmer it covered for about an hour. I usually do it for 2, maybe 3 if I'm doing like a carcass or something that just really needs that time to cook down. You want to obviously, like I said, cover it to keep the moisture in. Okay, the end product that we're looking for is soup base. We need that liquid to stay in the pot. Sorry. This is like take 4. I'm really tired. I almost didn't do a video today, but I needed to make soup, so I figured I might as well. Now, when you are done with your stock and it is boiled fully, what you're going to do is strain out all of the ends there, and you want to make sure, I've done it before, it's really bad when you do it. You put the colander over and you're going to strain out all of the bits and pieces, and you forget that you are trying to collect the soup, and so you end up saving all of the vegetable scraps and pouring your beautiful stock down the drain. Don't do that. Okay, make sure you have a bowl that you're putting your colander over top. Strain out all of your odds and ends. If you're using things like chicken backs, there's going to be tiny little bones. You want to make sure that you're straining those out too. Now, what your stock will look like if you decide to chill it or let it sit, and it can freeze very well as well, just for reference. But if you've done a good stock, what you're actually going to have is a gelatinous texture to it once it is set and cooled down. And that can be a little unnerving for some people. Some people are alarmed that maybe that's a high fat content, but that's not what this is. It's actually collagen being extracted from the bones. As we're boiling these things down, we're extracting flavor and nutrients from it. Collagen is excellent for your hair, your nails, your skin. See, this is one of the reasons that people talk about bone broth being this incredible thing. It sounds like people have never heard of their grandma making soup before. We call it stock. Fancy restaurants call it bone broth. All it is boiling bones, getting the nutrients, getting the flavor, and using that in your recipes. Now, after I've set that aside, I'm just going to show you what you do to build your soup once your stock is ready. So, I had a friend ask me to show the proper way to cut onions, and this is how much I love you because I hate onions. Anytime that you're cutting something, you want to start it with a flat side down. You don't want to be rolling around trying to cut a rolling onion. Make sure that as you are cutting, when you're holding your knife, if you're using a chef's knife, you're actually pinching the blade, okay? You don't hold your knife all the way back here. You want to hold it up here. That gives you more control. As you're holding your vegetables, you want to curve your fingers so that they're kind of pinching at the back so that the knife doesn't have the opportunity to get to your fingertips, okay? Oh gosh, I hate cutting onions. I have a friend that the smell just does not bother her. It bothers me. So Jessie, if you want to come cut onions at my house anytime, by all means. The quickest way to cut anything is to do all of one direction and then switch and do all of another direction. So I'm not going to cut a slice off and then start dicing that slice. I'm going to cut it all into slices and then I'm going to dice all of my slices up. Onions are nice because you actually get to save one direction of cutting because it comes off in layers. Now I'm going to dice up onions, carrots, and celery. Seriously, hate onions. When you're doing it, again, I'm going to cut my carrot in half, make sure that I've got a flat side to work with. I'm not really going to do a dice for this. I'm going to do a slice just because that's the size that I want and the shape that I want for my soup. It doesn't really make sense to cut up one carrot stick when you can cut up 3 at a time. I'll actually demonstrate that with the celery. Remember, I've already washed these, I've peeled them, I've cut the ends off, and that's already in my stock, okay? So take 2 of the same size and shape thing, as long as it's not too big. Make sure they are laying flat so that they don't roll. Keep your fingers back and just rock your knife. If you're using a chef's knife, it actually has a bit of a curve to the blade. It's ideal for rocking. Something like a Santoku blade, that one has a flat blade. It doesn't rock, it's more for chopping. But I like using my chef's knife for applications like this. Now, if you have diced onion, diced carrot, diced celery, and you cook it down with some oil, not so that it's brown, but just so that it's tender and translucent, that's called a mirepoix, and that's a flavor base for a ton of things. You can do this flavor base for most of the soups that you're going to be doing, just depending on kind of what flavors and what vegetables you want present. Maybe you're going to dice your celery finer so that people aren't really aware of it there, but if you're making a minestrone, a chicken noodle soup, even like a cream of broccoli soup, anything like that, lasagna soup, you can start with a mirepoix base. Other things that you can start adding at this point, like I said, you're going to cook this with a bit of oil in a fresh pot ready for your soup to go in, right? And you can start adding other vegetables, things like zucchini or peppers, anything that wants a little bit of heat applied to it to cook, not just boiling, okay? But again, we don't want to throw in things like broccoli or asparagus at this point because that's going to cook too long. The flavor is going to degrade and it's going to actually taint the rest of your soup. So once you've got your vegetables cooked, you can actually throw in, if you aren't doing pre-cooked meat into your soup, this is where you would throw it in with your mirepoix base. You want to cook that up with oil, and then you want to add your spices, okay? Your spices, you've got to think about what flavors you're doing with your soup. Do you want Italian flavors? Are you doing a curry or mulligatawny? Are you doing something with more of an Asian feel, like an oxtail soup, or you're going to want star anise in there? You've got to think about this and figure out what flavors you're building, okay? At this point, if you're actually going to do like a thickened soup, You can add your flour in at the same time as your spices. If you're doing tomato paste, now is the time to add that too. And then you would just stir everything up as it's cooking, coat it, and then you can deglaze. Now, deglazing is just pouring a liquid over the hot stuff, and it pulls up all of the flavor and the bits off of the bottom. You can deglaze with wine, you can deglaze just with your stock, whichever works. And at that point, you would throw in, if you're using beans or diced tomatoes, things like that, all of that can go in at the same time as your stock. Now, next, you're going to let that cook for a little bit until things get a little bit tender. And then you can look at adding things like your broccoli and your asparagus or pasta or rice, things like that. If you're going to be doing cream into your soup, you need to add that closer to the end. You never want to boil a cream soup. Once the cream is already in, it can separate very quickly. I used to have a boss who told us she would kill us dead if we ever let her cream soup boil. I think she was joking. We never tested her on it. We were really scared. So don't boil your cream soups. As you're going closer to the end, like 10 minutes before you serve the soup, maybe you need to add some brightness. You want to be tasting as you go, checking your flavor balance. You want to make sure that you have all of the spices in there that you need. About 10 minutes before is the perfect time to do that. You can look at adding things like sugar or vinegar or a spritz of lemon. You can add more salt. There's some spices that they need more time than that to really thrive and really show their colors, like a bay leaf. You want to add that closer to the beginning, okay? But if you are tasting it and you think, oh, this needs a bit more basil or a bit more thyme, you can add that 10 minutes to the end and it will have time to transfer the flavor throughout, okay? Then there are garnishes, things that you're going to add right at the very end. So that's things like grated cheese on top or maybe some fresh herbs that you don't want them to degrade in the soup from the heat. Okay, that's where you would add it. If you're planning on doing a soup over multiple days, I've seen a lot of people cook up their pasta. Like if you're doing a chicken noodle soup, you can actually cook that separate, put it in the bowl, and spoon the soup over top. And then whatever soup you have left over, you can actually freeze that. A lot of soups freeze really well. It's just the reheating process. They might need more liquid. They might need more salt or flavor, thing like that. You can add more of that. But if you are freezing a soup with noodles, it doesn't always revive very well. Same with rice. Okay, that's going to end up being a little bit more mushy. So think about that, how much you're making if you're planning on having leftovers, okay? I think that's pretty well it for today. I don't even know what kind of soup we're going to have for dinner, but it will have a mirepoix base and probably chicken in it. So I hope that you learned something. If you guys have any requests for things that you want me to do videos on, things that maybe you're interested in, things you want to learn, things you're scared to try, just let me know. Type it in the comments, send me a message, and I'll see if I can fit it in. All right, thanks guys. See you tomorrow.